Hi everyone, welcome to this very special Q&A for Holding Moses, which of course has been shortlisted for the Best Documentary Short Film Oscar. I'm Anna Smith, I'm a film critic and I'm host of the Girls on Film podcast. And I'm extremely pleased to be hosting today and to welcome my guests today. We have co-directors Rivkah Beth Medow and Jen Rainin. Welcome to you both. And of course, Randi Rader, who is in the film. Welcome to you all.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here.
I'm excited to speak to you because I am so moved by this film. I've watched it several times. I'm sure you hear this a lot, but I was tearing up every time. I found it such a powerful film about love, about family, about queer identity, and of course, disability, inability. It's also a joyful film to me. So thank you for that experience. I wanted to say to the audience, welcome, and also please feel free to leave your questions in the chat box and we will get to those. And otherwise, I wanted to start with you all and just say why you felt strongly about making this film. Who wants to go first? Rivkah, maybe?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Anna. I'm thrilled that we're all here together. And this film is really born of my relationship with Randi. Randi and I are partners. I have a long-term husband as well. We have an open marriage, and Randi and I have been together for several years. A few years ago, right at when the pandemic was falling onto our world, I had a really a grief that I was trying to wrap my mind around, and it's still going on. So I really had to understand. I wanted a pathway through it. I knew that Randi had given birth to Moses, and that she'd had some complicated feelings around that. But when I met Moses, he was maybe 5 or 6. He's almost 10 now, and their relationship was beautiful. And he's medically fragile, so there's a lot of complexity there. But I wanted to know how she moved through those feelings and how she grapples with those feelings. So we sat down for an interview. It was it turned into a 3-hour interview because I'm a filmmaker and I like to obsess over things. And I was like, I want to know everything about you and your life and what brought you to the person that you are to today. So we locked ourselves up at a friend's house and did a really clean recording. We didn't know it would be a film at the time, but it was powerful. And I cut together like a 20-minute radio edit afterwards and shared it with my incredible creative partner, Jen. And it felt like it was something special. The intimacy that you hear is really Randi and me talking. We are having a conversation, and it became the track to the film. So that's what you're hearing inside it. So I sent it to Jen, and Jen received it.
It was such a surprising thing to receive. It's such an intimate conversation. And I mean, I love so much the way that Rivkah moves through the world and processes the things that are challenges for her. And the idea that she would turn to Randi to try to find, a roadmap, a path to get her manage her own grief so that she could show up well for the people she loves. And that she would have the thought to record it. And, as she said, she wanted to just sort of dive into every detail and really just figure out what she could take from Randi's journey, but then that she would cut it down and send it to me. I don't know, it was a huge honor. So this was in March of 2020. I'm sure we all remember where we were in March of 2020. The world was quite something. So I was actually sitting right here where I am now. I pressed play and closed my eyes, and my body started to move as I was listening to the story, this is not normal for me. This is not how I roll. and then I started to cry, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is really a powerful story. And the idea of turning it into a film, trying to find visuals that would bring the audience into Randi's internal journey, because that's what she describes, was such an exciting challenge. So that's what we spent the next almost 18 months doing together.
I'd like to talk to you more about the visuals, actually, but let me come to Randi next and ask how it felt to be so open. And by the way, thank you for your bravery, your honesty. I'm sure it has resonated so much with many, many people. But talk to me about that decision to share it, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. You know, I think, as Rivkah said, I wasn't fully aware that it would become a film. And even if I had been, I don't know that that was my central focus. Here was like the person who I just love dearly asking me the hardest questions, asking me to reveal myself, and holding like a big, warm space for that. And honestly, I don't think that I've ever had that kind of invitation before, especially around something that is certainly a trauma in my life that then has morphed into the most meaningful thing in my life. And so to have it encapsulated in a conversation, a long conversation, really was, it really taught me a lot about my own experience. And then to watch Rivkah and Jen take it and mold it into the film that it is today has been unbelievably healing, because although, you know, everything is real, that this is my life and these are the resources that I use to understand how to parent Moses, I didn't necessarily even know that. You know, I think we survive hard things, right? And we're not always able to like document them and understand them and take a step back and see it holistically. And so this film for me has been such a gift, not only personally, but just to watch how it's impacted other families. You know, I think what Rivkah mentioned about her own grief and the healing that it can have there, I think that's just exponential in what the film is doing right now. So I'm just very moved by the process.
It is so powerful. Thank you again for that on behalf of everyone watching, because I'm sure everyone was deeply moved. I wanted to, before I move on to some of the themes of this, come back to the imagery, because Jen, you mentioned that, and it is so powerful. And on the second time I was watching it, I noticed how interesting and precise yours and Rivkah's decisions must have been. And are there any specific examples of moments where you had a sort of creative kind of brainwave in a way where you thought, okay, this is what needs to go with this part of the dialogue?
I mean, there's so many. You know, you're right. Every single shot was very, very intentionally placed. Rivkah talks about working with a mentor of hers who guided her to remove everything that isn't 100% essential to tell the story, and I think that's what we did. The shot that my brain goes to first is where Moses is on the floor, and he's sort of scooting back, and he scoots out of frame just at the time that Randi, shares the hard words. That's what we call that part. And thinking through what's the right shot to put there, it felt like a beautiful way to telegraph the I don't know, wish for the reality to just be different than it is.
Yeah, so we, in thinking about when you make a film, you don't often have the entire audio track figured out yet. So in that way, we could be really specific, and we could imagine, we could dream around, what would be the right, what could be the right metaphor to put with this visually, right? So we got to design the film visually, and we also had some time because it was the pandemic. So we could use nature. We could use the seasons. We could use the hail. I mean, that was a crazy gift. We could use nighttime. We could use early morning, right? So all of a sudden our palette got really broad, and Then we worked with an extraordinary editor, Greg O'Toole, who's a really old friend. He married my husband and me. We made our first film together. We've had just a long relationship and a deep understanding. And of course, we worked with Claire Major, who as our cinematographer, who is just gifted, and she provides so much emotional space. So when she, because Jen wasn't able to be there, we weren't in the same bubble. Claire was always wearing a mask, so it was just Claire and me at most of the shoots until the very last one with Randi and Moses. And it was just a very small, intimate kinds of shoot. We thought for a while, Randi bikes, she takes like 50-mile bike rides every weekend across the Marin, like gorgeous Marin landscape. And we thought for a while, like that would be an incredible metaphor, right? She's going through like light and dark, like heavy forest, open field, overlooks, highs, lows, working really hard, enduring. And so we rented electric bikes, kind of tried to rig up a follow bike that Claire would ride on the back of. We ended up really only using 2 shots from that and leaning more into Randi dancing. That felt like that nonverbal kind of communication was just spot on for how to convey the relationship that Randi has with Moses. Yeah.
I love that link made with dancing. And Randi, I was so struck by your descriptions of how powerful and how connected that was with your evolving relationship with Moses. Is it something that you felt very strongly should be included in this film?
I would say that I feel very strongly that it should be included in my life. And so therefore, I guess the answer to that is yes. It was one of the other things that I didn't even realize I was doing, but now I can't believe I couldn't live a moment without my physical connection to myself and my physical connection to Moses. When he was born, we didn't know the extent of his ability. We didn't know if he would be able to connect physically, if he would be able to like withstand physical touch by other people, if he'd be able to or want to, be social. And all I knew was in the early days, all I knew how to do was like be body to body with him for so long, because he was, lower muscle tone and he needed someone to move him in his every move. And so that was something I think through the dancing that I just understood that language. And so, and it continues to this day. Moses is like one of the most physically connected humans I've ever met. Like when he hugs people, they start crying, random people. And it's amazing because he just gives his full self to that experience. So I think at the beginning I was sort of, I think I might've been teaching him, and now he's certainly teaching me and others. But as far as your question, I do think that it is important because that is the heart of the story, I think, is learning how to trust my voice and body, and therefore learning how to love him. So. And
of course, the title reflects that very beautifully. Yeah. Jen, I wanted to talk to you about representation on screen. I know that you and Rivkah, in your work, that's very important to you. And there is a lot of representation in this film, but I want to hear from your perspective what you wanted to do differently and what you're proud of.
Oh, God, I'm proud of everything about this film.
Rightly so.
Yeah, I think, so Rivkah and I have a production company called Frankly Speaking Films that our mission is entirely to tell mesmerizing stories about strong queer women and non-binary people, because there are not enough. There just are not. In this story, in Randi's story, I sort of keep coming back to this. This film centers a non-binary queer mother. I don't know. I don't know any other films like it. Like when does that happen? I can't think of another time. It's a huge deal, actually. And what I am particularly proud of is that Randi's queerness is not what the story is about. It's just a part of her. It certainly contributes to how she moves through the world, how she was prepared even to mother Moses. But yeah, this is not a coming out story. This is not a stereotype in any conceivable way. It's this is the kind of film I want to see in the world. And so I'm just crazy proud that we were able to do this. Rivkah, would you add anything to that? I mean, we talk about representation all the time.
Yeah, no, I think you said everything beautifully.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested to talk more about representation of disability, of course. And for me, this was such a positive story in so many ways, even though there's a lot of heartbreak in it. It is, as I say, there's so much joy and love, and the power of family love you see in this film is amazing. Would anyone like to speak to that?
Oh, do you want to jump in on that? I just was thinking that this is so interesting because it's the story of a caregiver and not of a disabled person.
Right. Right.
So, but sorry, go ahead, Rivkah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly it. You know, we realized pretty early on that this was Randi's story. This is a story of a caregiver, and a story that we don't often hear in our culture. Caregiving is usually relegated to conversations in support groups, in therapy sessions, right? It's a much more private kind of experience. Caregivers don't, and of which, you know, Jen and I are both caregivers as well. We don't take up a lot of space. It feels selfish. There's a lot of guilt involved in talking about some of the challenges around caregiving. And so in making this film, you know, we came to understand that it's a caregiver story. It's also a journey of ableism. It's around, you know, we really wanted to embed several layers of our themes inside of a film that was extremely experiential. We wanted to have audiences come, we wanted to make it as beautiful as we possibly could, so that any resistance to seeing a protagonist like Randi would fall away quickly. Like, you wouldn't, you know, even if you came with bias, it would quickly be dispelled, and you would hopefully be wrapped in the story quickly. And then, you know, looking at lensing Moses is, you know, there's complexity there. Like, let's get into it, right? Like, I am able-bodied. That's, you know, Randi is able-bodied, and so is Jen. We had to consult with our community of disabled adults, parents of atypical kids, other queer families. We wanted to make sure that we were respectfully presenting and truthfully presenting this story. It's complicated to do that, and it should be, right? It should be. So when we get to tell these stories with our communities, it's important. It was really important for us to include statements from Randi, like that she thought there was one kind of disability, right? A Down syndrome child, and to talk about, you know, why so many people, so many parents who have children with disabilities, that's where they begin, right? They have no idea the spectrum of disability. So creating a relatable experience woven through, where at the end, I mean, I think everyone's seen it. You know, it's probably not a spoiler to say, you know, Randi was the one who had to change. It was critical to include that idea.
And Randi, being a caregiver, it was very interesting to see you reaching out to other caregivers and learning from them and that community. What kind of responses have you had from people who've watched this film, who might be in related or similar situations?
Yeah, that's been absolutely one of the most meaningful parts of this. So when I first had Moses, and I was just in a lot of acute confusion and pain and trauma, I went to a support group for mothers of disabled children, and I talk about it in the film, and they were absolutely my lifeline. And then I thought after a couple of years, like I I should be done. Like I'm done with that acute phase, and I can't really struggle. I mean, life is difficult, but like I don't really get to be involved in that same way. And then, a few years, much more recently, I was struggling again. And I went back to that same support group, and some of the same women were still there. And now I'm there every Monday night. And those women are like family, because and all our kids are very different. They present really differently. But they understand in a way that I can't get anywhere else, really. And so when the film came out, they were, the ones I was most excited to see it. And we've also done an impact campaign with disabled adults and other syndromes, like Moses is another ones too. And so we've gotten a lot of feedback. And I will say that overwhelmingly, I'm so grateful that the film helps caregivers feel seen and held. I think because my ignorance is shown on the on screen, and then I come through it, and the way I come through it is actually by watching another caregiver, Joaquin's father, and so that was the key for me. And I think it's the same with this film. This film is the key for a lot of parents that come and tell us that what I say, they have those exact words and those exact feelings, and to see that validated is huge, and it creates community immediately. And so that's just been, it's been overwhelmingly positive on that front.
I love that idea of creating a community immediately. I mean, that just shows what's so important about film, isn't it? Incredible. I wanted to remind the viewers that the chat box is open, so please get your questions through. And now I wanted to ask Rivkah and Jen about the music, because the music feels quite important in this. Who would like to speak about that?
So there are a couple strains of music going on. There's the score, and then there's the stomp music, that you hear, and that actually Randi created with her feet. We really, we knew that we wanted the score to reflect tonally what's happening in the film, and to not take over, but to be present. But actually, Jen had a wonderful idea about like creating rhythms throughout. So, sometimes, when Randi's tapping her whiskey glass, or when she's teaching Tavi a stomp rhythm, just making sure that we follow that percussive kind of those rhythms, make sure that those are woven in. We had a really a great experience. We rented a black box theater. We needed to have dancing is really, there for Randi's emotional landscape. And so we wanted to have some different colors to paint that with. One of them, Randi's not in Stomp anymore. And so we wanted to create, and it was also the pandemic, we wanted to create a space where, you could really feel that. It's physical. It's, it's got, she's got the chalk dust flying, and she's sort of alone under the spotlight. So we took all those rhythms and we put them in, over the credits. We just wanted to, thread that through so that you could really feel that percussiveness pull you along through the story. Jen, what would you add?
I just would say that to add that this story, as we were telling it, as we were creating the film, it just became so clear that the way that Randi experiences the world through the rhythms of her body and the rhythms of her life, and the shift that happened to those rhythms when Moses was born, just felt important. And so we really did lean into that percussive nature of Stomp, and of the way that she moves. I mean, I love the way that Randi, when she sits with her whiskey, she's flicking the glass, like it's in a rhythm, like it's these are all, every piece of it just worked.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with how Randi moves. Like, she holds her hands in a certain way when she's talking, and there's just, I find it's mesmerizing. So thought maybe other people would find that too.
Definitely. We've had some questions in from the audience. And the first one says, this is the second project you've co-directed. Can you talk more about your creative partnership and how you balance the creative and editorial decisions as a duo?
This is our second co-direction. Our first project together was Ahead of the Curve, which was the story of my wife, who started the best-selling.
Coincidentally, yeah.
A theme emerging.
Yeah, it's all about access here. It's all about access.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I could talk for several hours about our creative partnership. I would start by saying it is the greatest gift. I mean, to have someone who I trust so implicitly, who everything that we write together, which by the way is pretty much every day, is a joy. We balance each other extremely well. I mean, I think we got very fortunate in finding each other. It's sort of like a marriage in a way, right? You know, you find someone who, I know it sounds hokey, but you complete me, you know?
Yeah, we have these nicknames for each other. So Jen is Glorious and she calls me Notorious. And it's just this like, I mean, when you get to the point where you can edit, you know, when you're in your Google Doc and you're, you can be in editing or suggesting mode. And at first this was, you know, maybe 5 years ago when we started working together really intensely, would be really respectful and do everything in suggesting mode. And if there was something that Jen wrote, you know, I'd be really careful to, you know, just make sure, because, you know, you want to step light and build the trust. So now we're, you know, almost often in edit mode. It's just, you know, there's very little ego. We trust each other to make whatever is being written better, level it up. You know, in terms of the filmmaking, Jen led as director on our feature film Ahead of the Curve, where I was co-director on that. So really, then on this one, I'm director, she's co-director. It's just, but we make decisions together and we bounce ideas off each other. Feels, you know, we bring different skill sets. Jen's a Virgo, a little more organized. I'm an Aquarius, like these things are. But we really come together, and it's just, I love having this partnership. I love having a creative partner who I just trust with this universe.
Yeah, we are super duper highly collaborative. I think it's that, you know, the balance between creative and editorial, we're just in constant dialogue about every decision.
Well, because we're also really mission minded, right? Like we're genre agnostic and we just want to tell complex stories about LGBTQ plus women and non-binary people. So that can take any form. And as long as there's this values line that runs through it, you know, we're interested in the creative challenge.
Well, my next question perhaps will go to Randi. This is from a member of the audience. Have you screened the film to Moses and the other members of the family, and how did they react to the film, if that's the case?
Yeah, so Moses, I have tried, and he isn't so interested. I think it's too much mommy and not enough Moses on the screen. He likes watching videos of himself, but everyone else, he's kind of like, no thanks. So I keep telling him about it, and I try to show it to him, but he's not so interested. He'd rather, you know, play with a soccer ball and walk around and stuff. And so that's cool. My oldest daughter has certainly seen the film, and she, you know, it's a couple of years ago now. So she's like, can we just redo that one scene? Because I don't like how my hair was in that one. And she doesn't really understand at all, like that's not going to happen. And she gets upset about that. But I think
have to say that she
okay, yeah. I was gonna get to that. So basically, the other night, I was like, we were talking about the film, and so she decided to do a one girl 2-minute version of Holding Moses that just starred my daughter Tavi. So she did a rendition. And she like basically was dancing for like 2 minutes solid. And at the end, she really started speaking about like kind of the essence of the film, the message of the film, like, you know, like I had to learn how to love, you know, him. And I was like, oh, she gets it. You know, she understands. And that was really fantastic. So although it was very funny, I really was actually secretly being like, oh my God, this is really meaningful that she's present for this. And then my youngest doesn't really understand. The other day, she's like, you know, the film? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, in the end, when we were walking, was I holding your hand or was I on your shoulders? I'm like, you're on my shoulders. She's like, okay, cool. I'm like, okay. So she kind of sort of understands that there's a film, but not really, you know, more than that. But ultimately, I think it's something that they will have like forever, ever. And I think that the appreciation will only grow as they mature.
Definitely. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
The next question is, how meaningful would it be for you to get nominated in terms of the visibility for the themes of the film? That's to anybody.
It would be enormously meaningful. First of all, queer women, LGBTQ plus women, non-binary people, we tend to be pretty invisible in the world. Not a ton of it's getting a little better, certainly in the fiction world, not so much in the nonfiction world yet. But we don't see ourselves represented very often, and certainly not in a nuanced way. So the visibility for that piece of it would be incredibly meaningful. And on top of that, I think caregivers, and there are, I mean, so many of us are caregivers in the world. We also tend to be invisible. We're not, you know, it's frowned upon for a caregiver to express a need or an experience, or, you know, it's usually about the person who is being cared for and not about the caregiver. Caregivers are, there's almost an expectation of invisibility. And that's actually harmful. Yeah. It's harmful. It's hard for people to process their grief, their challenges, their emotions if they're not allowed to talk about them. And this film makes a space for those conversations to happen so that people can move through their emotions and can become stronger and better connected and have better experience in the world. So it would mean everything, actually. I don't have a big enough word for what it would be, what it would mean.
Yeah. It's a huge platform. It's, you know, it's people are seeing this film now that would never have seen it before. You know, it's a small independent film about, you know, one family in California. We were so fortunate and really grateful to Sarah Lash and Sujong Kang at the New Yorker. They have been a phenomenal team, and, you know, all the people there, you know, because that elevated the film and gave it another platform. And it helps us in our community screenings with rare disease groups, disability orgs, queer family groups. But, you know, a nomination, of course, like, there's so many benefits to it. It's such a huge stage, you know, on which to tell the story. And it, you know, let's talk frankly, it will enable us to make another film after this. You know, it's really, it's those two incredible benefits that we're excited about.
Randi, would you like to add anything before my final question, which is coincidentally the same as what one of the audience members has asked, so that works out perfectly.
You know, just to echo that, you know, I think this story is one that that really needs to be told. I don't think I've seen a story like this where, you know, the journey is sort of surprising in that it's the caregiver's journey, and that, you know, Moses is lovable all along. And so it's like to watch the adult in the room have to have a reckoning, is really important, I think, for us all to take a moment and look at like where we all need to have that reckoning. And I think a nomination would certainly allow more people to see the film and in turn to have some kind of journey, some kind of transformation. And so that's just an exciting prospect, I think, for other people to potentially have. So
thank you. Now, of course, you mentioned you'd love to make another film. Jen and Rivkah, can you reveal what it might be that you are working on next, hopefully?
We actually have a number of projects in development right now. We have a feature doc that we can't really talk too much about, but it's another very intimate, very personal story with some themes that are not well, presented yet in the world. We are working on a docu-series that, gosh, what can we say about these things?
We're not, but there's a lot in development. We can talk about the fiction film American Dog.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah,
and
we have a
couple of other films like Jeanette. We should talk about Jeanette too.
Yeah, let's do. So we have a film that's out right now in the world called Jeanette, about a survivor of the Pulse massacre, and she's a bodybuilder. So she's literally one of the strongest women in the world. Her story is beautifully told. Maris Curran and
John Coplin.
And John Coplin are, well, Maris is the director, and that film's out. We'll see. We're working on figuring out where it will go after festivals. And it's about to go to the National Gallery for several screenings, which we're excited about. And then in terms of, American Dog. American Dog is a really fun satirical comedy drama from Tom E. Brown, and that is, I think, what can we say about that? You could say.
It's the story of a lesbian cop in a small town in America who, she's unhinged because her girlfriend left her and stole her identity, and then her beloved dog died, and she snaps and decides that she's not putting up with the homophobes or the racists or the misogynists in her small town, and she goes about cleaning house in the funniest ways you can, actually funnier ways than I could imagine. It's brilliant. So we're pretty excited about that one.
I am sold on all those films. That sounds brilliant. I look forward to chatting with you all about that in due course. Meantime, thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And thank you all so much for joining me. Best of luck. And thank you for sharing Healthy Moses with us. Thank you.
Thank you all
for having us.
Thank you, Anna. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.